Good morning, everybody. If you are looking for the July meeting of the Oregon Housing Stability Council, you've come to the right place. We opened the room just a couple of minutes ago, letting people join us in virtual community, and we'll call a meeting to order and get down to business in just a couple of moments. We really ought to have something like the Jeopardy theme music or something to fill this silence, or maybe there's not enough quiet in our lives. Well, it looks like the number of participants entering is starting to slow a bit. And then, of course, four more just pop in. Interesting. Let's do it. Good morning, everybody. It is Friday, July 12th, 2024. This is the meeting of the Oregon Housing Stability Council for the month of July. Thank you all for joining us in virtual community. I'm Claire Hall, the council chair, and we start off with a roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair Hall. For the record, Councilmember Meehan will be joining us later this morning. Councilmember DeFantorum.
Present.
Councilmember Farrell.
Here.
Chair Hall.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Mena.
Here.
Councilmember Rogers.
Here.
Councilmember Harris.
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Here.
Thank you, Chair. We have quorum.
Wonderful. And next item on the agenda is the chair's report. And I'm going to keep it brief this month. The fact, I think everybody who has looked at this packet knows that this will be one of our lighter agendas in quite some time. And I'm sure that council members and staff as well appreciate this lull, but don't get used to it. In August, we're going to have a lot of robust topics, many requested by the council. Chief among them, a status report on the statewide housing plan and continued conversations around the 2025-27 agency request budget. And the key part of that will be talking about how we as a council can support advocacy and engagement on that budget. So with that, I will note that Department Director Andrea Bell is not with us this morning. She is taking a long overdue vacation, but we're in good hands with Deputy Director Caleb Yant, and I will yield to him now for the Deputy Director's report.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair Hall, Housing Stability Council members, members of the public that are listening. I really appreciate being with you. I will do my best to hold it down. As Chair Hall said, Director Bell is enjoying a well-deserved small amount of time off. And so I really only have one item that I wanted to update the council on, and it's related to what one of the items Chair Hall just discussed, which is our continued conversation around the 25-27 budget, both the agency request budget and then how that translates ultimately into the governor's budget and the legislative adopted budget for the next biennium. Just kind of point of the reference in the conversation, last month, you all heard from the different division directors, right? What is, you know, the engagements that they had with partners in virtual town halls and other forums, and what some of the items that were coming forward as part of their agency request budget specific to their programmatic divisions. My update today is kind of a preview of a document that we'll be sharing with the council and the public shortly after this meeting. It's a document we just finalized this week. And it's a summary of what we've heard from that engagement process, what we've heard from community as we engaged and talked about what the next biennium's budget might look like. And it's intended to you know, provide some of that feedback as we then think about the conversation in August. Dr. Martin Luther King said, budgets are a moral document. They show what our commitments are as a nation and as a society. In practice for OHCS, this is a key place where, frankly, our value statements either show up or they don't. And it's where we could practice appropriate power sharing with community by authentically listening and then being accountable to act based on what we heard. And so our intention in providing this summary and putting it out publicly is to be able to say, okay, this is what we heard. What you'll see in that document culminates from a series of virtual town halls, followed by topic-specific surveys, and a really kind of robust data collection effort that we engage with specifically homeless service providers and tribes to provide estimated funding needs for the next biennium. I will note, for some council members know this, I was the CFO of our agency for a number of years and ran a few agency request budget builds. And we have never as an agency been able to collect, we have never as an agency collected the level of data from community of their needs, of their costs driven from their voice, rather than us providing that, which was informed, you know, assumptions that were informed by them. So being able to go out and say, what is it that you tell us, rather than us say, this is what we're thinking, please validate or give us input on that, was a really robust effort that we want to be able to, again, just share out what we've heard. Topics that were focused on that engagement process included homeownership investment, included preservation and permanent supportive housing investments, and it included shelter investments specifically, but not exclusively. You'll see in there that about 230 partners from around the state, including developers, service providers, mortgage lenders, tribes, advocates, culturally specific organizations, and other state agencies all participated, and is a, you know, those that information is included in there. Just kind of a high level preview of what you'll see there. Common themes from that include the need for increased administrative funding, the need for stable and long-term program funds, need for increased collaboration both within OHCS across different agencies, within community, need for data standardization, financial investments in culturally specific organizations and services, and obviously more than that. Just, you know, putting it into context, we're still analyzing the themes. We wanted to get it out, to post it publicly as we're continuing to work through the build of our agency request budget. We're working in partnership with the governor's office on next steps of that process. But again, we wanted to share this information now as we work for all of the voices to inform what ultimately is in our agency request in the governor's budget later this year. So that's my update. Again, we'll be sharing this. We'll be posting this publicly and sharing it with the council shortly after this meeting. But just a kind of a preview of that, and hopefully intended to be a progression of the conversation for our agency and for this council. So, Chair, with that, I will yield back to you.
Thank you so much. And we move on now to the Affordable Rental Housing Division report. And are we ready with, ready with that?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair Hall, Deputy Director Yant, Housing Stability Council. Nice to see you this morning. We have, as we've said, a light agenda here, I think because of the many hours of meetings that you've spent with us leading up until this moment where there's transactions moving forward. And so we have three coming forward with you today, and I'm going to hand it off to Assistant Director Ty Dunson Strain to walk that through, and I'll share screens, and so I'll hand it off to you, Ty. Thanks.
One moment, please, Director Detweiler Davy. We need to open the floor for the public hearing section of the agenda here. No one has signed up to give public testimony regarding these transactions, but we did want to put it out to the floor right now. If anybody would like to use the raise hand function, if you have a public testimony hearing regarding these transaction items.
Well, seeing none, I guess we can proceed.
Thank you. Public hearing testimony is now closed.
Thank you so much, Loa. So I will share my screen and hand it back to Ty. Thank you.
Good morning, members of the council, Chair Hall, Deputy Director Yant. Good to see you pinch hitting today, Director Yant. Always good to be in virtual community with these folks. For the record, Ty Dunson Strain, AD of Transactions, here to present three transactions that have been in the queue with OHCS for quite some time. Starting off with Peaceful Villa, sponsored by Home Forward. It's a 166 unit RAD transaction that we previously approved funds for preservation dollars, GHAP funds, and OHTCs, and now we're just coming for the bond 4% piece of the transaction. So in total, there's a range of unit sizes from efficiency studios, 1, 2, 3 bedrooms, and even some four bedrooms. The total bond ask is a little over 54 million, 600,000, and total project cost is over 97 million. As I mentioned, this is a RAD transaction, and the project includes mixing of building types, so three-story walk-ups, four-story mid-rise with elevators, a clubhouse, and the project is anticipated to close in August. Home Forward is partnering with ERCO to provide resident services. Orco has been in the region for quite some time, providing services to BIPOC immigrants and refugees, and also MWSB targets. Home Forward is committed to meeting the project expectations of 30% for the region, and we're going to be actively monitoring their progress throughout as part of our MWSB reporting. So with
Great.
that,
yeah, Ty, I was just going to add, I think we can move to the next project, but I did just
Sure.
want to, for context for Housing Stability Council, just explain what RAD transaction, which Ty referred to, it's Rental Assistance Demonstration Project, which is effectively a strategy for converting, this will be my English version of it, public housing to project-based rental assistance housing. So that is has broad long-term benefits to the both tenants and the housing authority. And so that's what that RAD transaction means. And so I'll move forward to the next project and hand it back to Ty. Thank you.
And then, yeah, we go down to McMinnville in Yamhill County with the project Stratus Village, a 175 unit project sponsored by the Housing Authority of Yamhill County. The project was previously awarded LIF funds, and we've awarded ag worker housing tax credits as part of this transaction. And the total conduit bond asked is over 40 million. Total project cost is over 73 million. Again, range of unit sizes. There's also three bedrooms, large 3 bedrooms, and with a range of affordability included. And the project is gonna essentially be closing this month. Also just note, the Oregon Health Authority is also providing grants on this project. The Grand Rom Tribe will also be has grant funds allocated to this project. The project will essentially have multiple project base covering units for folks with individual families that have these three preferences according to the grant funding with Oregon Health Authority. Next slide. So the project is also has plans and partnerships working with tribal community members as working with the Grand Rod Tribe, and the developer is also committed to meeting our MWSB goals for the region, and we'll be monitoring that closely. And last we to the tour and come back down to Wilsonville, and the project is sponsored by Palindrome Property Group, and it's in 121 units. It's in Wilson. It's in Clackamas County. We previously actually this project has received Metro funding. I'll note that, and there's a mix of bond structures totaling 37,800,000. Total project cost of over 57 million. There's a range of three bedroom, 2 bedroom, 1 bedroom studio units, and also includes PSH units that are being supported through the local efforts in the county. The project is slated to close this July. The sponsor is going to be working with Latino Network to provide resident services, including health, welfare, and education. The sponsor is committed to meeting our MWSB targets for the region, and we'll be also just continue to monitor those progress. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions on any of the projects presented.
Any questions from the council? Well, hearing none, then I believe
Chair Hall, I have some questions.
yes, Council Member Lee.
Thank you. Hey, Ty, thank you for that. So on the, oh gosh, I'm not gonna get the names right. So the
Sure.
first questions I have with Peaceful Village and the project in Wilsonville, are Urco and Latino Network under contract to receive compensation for the services and partnerships that are listed as part of the package?
Peaceful Villa, the MOU is signed. So they're under contract with Latino Network. They right now, to my knowledge, they're still finalizing that piece. So we didn't want to state that for, yeah.
And both of those MOUs outline compensation to be received by both of those organizations?
Yes, typically, yes, and for it's standard yes, there's a compensation grid that we typically.
Not always. That's why I'm asking, right? Like people say, I've talked to these people, or I'm partners with them in the rest of the world, and they've agreed whatever. And lots of times the MOU does not have compensation. I want us to be a little more crisp about this, because as our knowledge and expertise is growing here, it's important to understand the different levels of, yeah, I relate to them in the broader community, but I haven't actually talked with them on this project, to, yeah, we've talked about the project, but we're still talking about it, to, yeah, we've agreed that certain things will happen, and that includes money, right? Just as we get crisper and more experience with what we're doing here.
Yeah,
And
can I just add, Councilmember Lee, we completely agree. And I think we have over the past several years established robust diligence in affordable rental housing around those strategies. And I think maybe that's a conversation we can bring back about how we are navigating in those spaces. And again, when we're bringing it forward to Housing Stability Council, we have reason to believe those are mutual and appropriate relationships established, but we can provide more information and detail on what that diligence looks like for sure.
Yeah, and maybe it's just a teach-in so that we can understand, because you're portraying what your understanding is in the briefing you're giving us and in the documents, and maybe it's just a teach-in for us to know that when you say this, it does include X, Y, and Z, and so you don't really need to change what you're briefing us on. You just need to get us sort of understanding what your language is and what that means. Because, we had this happen with a couple of other projects last month.
Yes.
Right? Where community members were like, wait a minute, my name was on this project and I actually am not on this project, or haven't been talked to, or, those kinds of things. So
yes, and those are from a different set of processes. So this is,
I know. It wasn't your, these types of projects.
Not wanting to point fingers. I'm saying this is, that was a different set of processes that created that circumstance.
Yeah. So just asking in general, I completely
Certainly,
rely upon you and your staff's many, many hours of due diligence. And then the last comment I have is on the second project. Tell me again what that name is. The
Stratus Village.
Yeah, Stratus. Okay. When I look at the documents, under the section that says services to people of color, it lists the funding that the project has received, one of which comes from a sovereign tribe, but doesn't actually say that that's getting funding from different places is not service to people of color. And lower in the document, it says these units will be reserved for members of the Grand Ronde, and these units will be reserved. But that's not racial justice and equity. So I want to pull that out there. It's interesting to know. It tells us who's supporting the project, but it's not actually a racial justice and equity agenda to list the funding sources that are coming into the project. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
I appreciate that very much, and a great learning opportunity for us. I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, Natasha and Taya, I really appreciate that we can have this level of conversation and then discussion, and it's not personal, it's not whatever, it's like, how are we continuing to move forward? So I just really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the feedback.
Councilmember Rogers.
Good morning.
Good
So
morning.
my question is more just project related. I'm curious on the Peaceful Villa project, how they are going from 70 units to 166 units.
So it's going to be a combination of acquisition, rehab, and then new.
So
new
they're
units.
actually constructing another building, or they're going on top of an existing building, or
Yeah, so the dynamics is they're basically adding new existing units to the site, and they're gonna be doing a demolition rebuild.
okay.
So it's a site reconstruction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the site is big enough that it supports adding rebuilding these units on site.
That's good that they can do that. I was just a bit concerned about density as far as additional residents. I understand that we need more units, but if the space is smaller, to me, that could be problematic in the future. So thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, I think the overall assessment as this was doing a comprehensive redevelopment is not most projects are not doing that. And I think that this was a priority for Home Forward in terms of identifying that there was better use for the site in today than the site had been developed. So that expansion of units, I think, considers tenants having the appropriate space.
Any further questions, comments, feedback from the council?
Chair Hall, if I may, I just
Yes.
wanted to chime in on one piece. Councilmember Lee, just appreciation of the feedback and what you said and what Natasha, right, our ability to have conversations, which isn't frankly always easy to have in public spaces, but in pursuit of being a learning organization and getting better. And specific to the topic of kind of precision on where there are relationships with culturally specific organizations, what is what is the status of that on that spectrum that you kind of noted there. And I just want to affirm two things. I want to affirm kind of the, for lack of better words, maturity of affordable rental housing processes, as they've been practicing this for a while. They've been doing this for years and have been able to refine their practices and certainly will kind of follow up on those items that Director Detweiler Davey had mentioned there. I just also want to affirm the areas of the organization that haven't been developing for decades and wanting to apply the feedback that we have heard and learn in those places, right? We're not all in the same spot, but we are all like taking those lessons and getting better. And in those places where, you know, we haven't been doing it for decades, certainly those recent transactions where there was an alignment, where a statement was made that there was, you know, a relationship that didn't in fact, you know, materialize in the way on the ground that the specifically the culturally specific organization experienced. We're learning in those places too. So I just wanted to appreciate that, and I kind of affirm both, you know, both processes.
All right. Anything else from council or staff? Then we are at the point to consider the resolution, page 10 of the packet PDF. Would somebody like to move this?
So moved. And we're moving all three at once in that resolution. Is that correct? Great.
I
Yep,
believe
moved.
so. Yes.
I'll second.
All right. Could we have a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember DeFontorum,
Yes.
Councilmember Farrell,
Yes.
Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers,
Yes.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thank you, council members. We do meet quorum. Motion passes.
And that's our one and only decision item today. However, we do have a presentation on the CSBG state plan from the Housing Stabilization Division. Are we ready for that?
We are. Good morning, Chair Hall, Deputy
Good morning.
Director Yant, members of the council and members of the public attending today. My name is Liz Weber. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the interim director of the Housing Stabilization Division. And with me today is Brandy Boulos, who is a program evaluation analyst supporting the Community Service Block Grant Program. And Brandy will be giving an overview and an update on the state plan and application. There is no decision required. This is an informational briefing. And I will hand it over to Brandy. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Good morning, everyone. Let me make sure that I can get my share screen in the presentation function to work correctly. How's that? Can you see the presentation okay? Great. Yes, good morning, everyone. Chair Hall, Deputy Director Yant, and members of the council. Thank you for your time today. My name is Brandy Boulos. I use she, her pronouns. And as Liz said, I'm the program evaluation analyst in the Housing Stabilization Division's performance and evaluation team. I spend half of my FTE dedicated to providing evaluation and performance management support to the CSBG program. And today I'll be sharing with you an overview of CSBG, the CSBG state plan, how this year's state plan was developed, updates to the state plan, which are outlined in the memo that you were provided, and leave time for questions at the end. So a quick overview of CSBG. Sorry, just want to get this out of the way. So the Community Services Block Grant are federal funds from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Community Services. And CSBG was created by the CSBG Act of 1964, which codified and authorized the formation of the community action agencies to promote economic opportunity and eradicate poverty. And OHCS is the Oregon State pass-through agency for 90% of CSBG funds going directly to eligible entities, and then retaining 10% for administration and discretionary purposes, including training and technical assistance. So this is just a summary of the national goals of the CSBG Act. And as you can see, there is alignment with OHCS, and as you will see in the state plan, alignment with those goals as well. So the CSBG state plan is the official application to the federal government for funding through the Community Services Block Grant. It's a document that's showcasing how the state will effectively meet the locally determined needs of Oregon's diverse low-income communities. And it's a way to certify and assure that Oregon will meet the federal and administrative requirements of the Community Services Block Grant. So OHCS receives feedback from the network and communities through many engagement opportunities in developing the state plan. And this year's state plan development began in April, followed by a feedback work group comprised of CAA staff, that's Community Action Agencies staff, in May. The draft state plan was released in June. There was a public hearing earlier this week, and the public comment period will stay open until July 23rd. Additionally, the network's work products, i.e. the CSBG requirements, such as the annual report, the community action plans and the organizational standards are all performance measurements that feed into the development of the state plan. So updates for this year are very minimal. Namely, the state plan goals are updated for each plan, and the use of funds funding formula had been updated in 2021, and this year is the final phase of that update and change. So we'll go over each of these.
Okay.
So the state plan goals for the 24-26 state plan are an opportunity for the CSBG State Lead Agency and Program Coordinator to identify and implement resources for eligible entities to strengthen agency capacity and evaluate programs and services. So these were provided in the memo, and there are 7 of them. They include providing DEI practices and training to raise awareness and reduce racial disparities, such as offering an equity tool like the REAT tool that we have at OHCS, and supporting implementation of that through working with executive directors, board of directors, etc. Second is to improve linkages from the state plan to the individual plans. Basically what that means is to make sure that statewide and local initiatives are well integrated, coordinated, and that there's communication. Third is to provide guidance around data collection for the annual report, which is a robust report of 14,000 data elements across the 18 agencies, and really providing the technical assistance needed to report on all of the national performance indicators and monetary requirements, etc. Fourth is to build and support certified ROMA trainers and implementers. And ROMA is the continuous learning and improvement tool adopted by the Community Action Agency Network. It stands for Results-Oriented Management and Accountability. And the state serves a unique role in providing expertise and TNTA around continuous learning and improvement. Fifth is creating a CSBG user manual for CAAs, and that's a shared goal between the state office and the network. And we're really excited to implement this operational best practice for clarity and transparency, and ultimately improving service delivery and outcomes. Sixth is uplifting the work of the CAA network and advocating for its initiatives, both as capacity building initiatives and community initiatives alike. And lastly is to build CSBG work group networking, including a data work group, DEI and racial justice work group. There are so many individual agencies doing great work, and sharing those wins and challenges is what being a community action agency network is all about. So each of those goals were developed collaboratively, and they serve the purpose of being able to bolster the CSBG program and meet all of the requirements that it has. This would be a much longer presentation if I could go through each of these in depth, but just wanted to highlight some of the requirements and how the goals are working towards meeting those. So talked a little bit about the organizational standards. This is really interesting. I think each agency has to report out on and provide documentation for 50+ organizational standards or agency health and alignment indicators in areas like consumer input, community engagement, community assessments, organizational leadership. So the state plan work and state plan goals are supporting capacity building towards being able to meet these standards. The state plan also asks for a performance target that we've set at 60% of agencies will meet 100% of the organizational standards. And the state plan also requires an explanation for how OHCS will address plans for training and technical assistance if organizational standards go unmet. Training and technical assistance is also spelled out in the state plan and how it will be used for bolstering DEI and racial justice, education and initiatives. Roma, we talked about already, the results-oriented management and accountability. Everything is connected in CSBG. And this is one of the ways that supporting Roma trainers and facilitators will help build strong connections between CSBG requirements like the community needs assessment and the community action plans, and how that gets reported out on in the annual report to track needs and services and outcomes and how that system of delivery is working. Like I said, linkages and communication, making sure that everything is coordinated from the state to the local level and everywhere in between. And if we meet all of our goals and we meet all of these requirements, then monitoring, corrective action, and fiscal controls should be a great way to demonstrate the success of agencies and the programs. The next update to the state plan I want to talk about is that the use of state funds is something that OHCS has to report out on in the state plan. How are we going to use CSBG funds? Basically, talk about the distribution process and timeline, the administrative percentage, and then that 90% allocation to eligible entities. We report that our funding method is a base rate plus a formula, which includes variables and criteria weights that I'll talk about next. And then the discretionary funds being available for TNTA and called out especially for practices, principles, and education in DEI and racial justice, supporting the state association CAPO, which also does a lot of TNTA needs and gaps analysis and provides that training. And lastly, statewide coordination and communication among the network. So the funding formula for CSBG was updated in 2021 with agreement from the CAPO, Professional Association, and the CEA network to be phased over 3 years, because recognizing that due to changes and shifts in funding, where some agencies may receive more and some may receive less, that there would just need to be time for any adjustments to lessen burden in service delivery. And so the final phase of that new funding formula will be administered on October 1st, 2024, because we're on the federal fiscal year. And in addition to the factors of poverty in the funding formula, Oregon has actually been a leader nationally in including a racial justice and rural populations criteria weight into our funding formula. So this includes an equity factor, named percentage of people of color in poverty with a 20% weight. This is the percentage of people designated in the data set as a race or ethnicity other than white non-Hispanic living below the federal poverty level during the past 12 months. The rural factor is named the inverse population density at 15% weight. The inverse population density is calculated with Oregon land area in square miles by county divided by total population. So those are the updates. This is my second to last slide of just a quick timeline, and then we'll open up for any questions or comments. So the state plan is submitted every 2 years. This is the 24-26 state plan, and it's due September 1st of this year. The draft state plan was posted to OHCS's website around June 25th. The public hearing was held on July 9th, and the public comment period will remain open for written comments until 5 p.m. on July 23rd. So thank you very much.
Okay. Questions, comments, or feedback from the council? Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Thank you, Liz and Brandy, for the presentation. Appreciate the opportunity to see sort of the highlights and the overview. I've got some specific questions and then some general observations. So maybe there's not a response to any of the things that I'm going to raise, but I offer them up. A couple of things, and they're not in necessarily any order. 3 years is a really long time to make a transition, particularly when it has to do with reallocation formula that's seeking better racial and geographic justice. That's way too long. Our organizations are used to dealing with very ups and downs in their fundings almost on the minute, which is not what I'm advocating happens, but 3 years is way too long for an allocation formula to be implemented that's trying to center racial and geographic justice. So way too long from my perspective. I wonder about the $125,000 base. I'm curious to know what that's actually buying. Could it really, I mean, in the past, the understanding about the base was that it was enough to open the door, right? And keep the door open. It's been 125 for a very, 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 very long time, like over 10 years. And I wonder what we're buying for 125. And is that actually possible to open a door and keep the door open at 125, depending on where various people are and what the situation is? It'd be great to have a greater understanding, and perhaps this is in the plan itself. I know we only saw, you know, a summary of that, but it'd be great to understand that. And I'm not sure why we wouldn't be increasing that, because costs certainly have increased. And it's the smaller agencies who bear the weight of that, because sometimes they're only getting the 125 plus maybe another 10 based on the allocation formula, right? So that's something that I think we should be looking at. I just want to reflect, and I think we've all seen this information, that diversity, equity, and inclusion training, there's a lot of research that says it's completely ineffective. And in fact, in its worst iterations, it harms rather than helps people and organizations to do better, be better around racial justice. So the emphasis we're placing on DEI training, I question it. I question it as a strategy. I question it even as a piece of the work that we have asked for years for this network and these organizations to do, why we're still asking for what appears to be very similar types of efforts. And I realize there is, you know, there's helping people to understand the REIT, but is it optional for people not to use the REIT? I think we need to think about that and actually mandate some things. Maybe everybody has to use the REIT because it's a tool for assessment and action, rather than saying we're going to get some really cool training for our folks on how to understand DEI. We're past that moment. And anybody who wants to tell us they're not shouldn't be a contract with us. I'm going to be super, super explicit about this. It's not like we sprung something overnight and people are reeling and trying to catch up with us. This has been literally a decade, if not longer actually, but let's just call it the decade that we have been having these conversations with these providers. It cannot be, let's give a little more time, let's give a little more space. There's been too much time and there's been too much space. And I don't say that as an accusation of an individual organization. I'm saying the system has given too much time and too much space on this issue, and we got to get real about it. The data training. Are we still really training people who have been in this system for decades and longer about how to fill out the data? Now, I understand there are new people who come in. The requirements really are pretty clear. If we're still going to train people on something they should already know, what's the accountability loop? And I know we've really struggled with this as an organization about when we set an expectation, and for whatever reason, you know, great reasons or not, someone is not able, an organization is not able to meet the expectation. What is the consequence, right? Is a check held? Is funding reduced? Is there something that goes into the next procurement or RFP that reflects that this organization was unable to make their commitments that they said they were going to make? It would be helpful to know what the accountability practices. And then finally, those are all sort of detail-oriented things, and you're working on all of that. I worry about this statewide plan being way too transactional and not aspirational enough. And I know to some extent we're following the recipe that the feds have said, talk about this, talk about that, address this, address that. We also have discretion to say what we're going to focus on and where we're going to go. And Brandy, even your comment that the allocation formula now takes into account a racial justice and a geographic justice aspect says we have some autonomy and we have some self-determination. And I want us to come back, and this is like coming way, way high up elevation. This legislation talked about two things. It talked about easing the experience of people living in poverty. So providing the food, providing the energy bill payment assistance, providing the rental assistance, et cetera, et cetera. And it also talked about ending the conditions that cause the need for the services, right? That cause poverty, that cause the need. And we as a community, as a state or whatever, have always struggled with this because there's people on the doorstep in real time need that pull our attention and focus as the primary place, justifiably so. However, in a plan and at the statewide level, we have a duty to think about ending the conditions. I don't see really anything in the statewide plan. And again, I know it's an update and we saw a high level synopsis about our understanding of the ending side of this equation. And without the ending side, we're just going to keep churning the wheel and churning the wheel. Sometimes there'll be more money, sometimes there'll be less money. Individuals may succeed and find themselves a way out of poverty, but systemically, the need for the people at the door is never going to end unless we start to talk about easing. And I think we've breadcrumbed some of this when, was it last month or the month before, when we supported the pilot for basic income. When we looked at what upstream prevention might look like. And I think particularly for CAPO, right, the association, that body has struggled, I think, to figure out what their role is, right? Is it an advocate again for the CAAs with OHCS? Is it a technical assistance arm for CAAs to bring their practice up? And all of that is pretty transactional. I would love to see some conversations with CAPO, the network, to talk about how they might lift up more around the ending the conditions piece of this equation, while the CAAs who are working, you know, on the street level are focused on easing the conditions, right? There has to be someone looking at ending the conditions, and that's a future focus. That's an upstream focus, that's a prevention, and that's doing something different than what we're doing now, not merely tweaking and fine tuning what it is we're doing on the easing side of it. So thank you for the work. And we've got to start thinking a little differently about these things. And it's not pie in the sky, we could do it, but if we don't ask ourselves those questions and we don't do it, it absolutely won't happen. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Farrell. Good morning.
Good morning. That's always hard to follow Councilmember Lee. She's so articulate. But I just want to reaffirm some of her messaging around, you know, inclusivity and equity isn't just training. And I'm fascinated to hear that there's been research that's indicating that it's not effective, in some cases harmful. And it reminds me that we've actually had this conversation as a council with staff in the past. I think maybe over the last few years even, that the training alone or checking the box that training was completed isn't creating change. And it's my observation that there seems to be a lot of hesitancy or concern when we use the word accountability. It's been 4 years that I've been on this council now, and I still have yet to see that defined. I don't know why exactly. I have thoughts and suspicions, but I don't believe it's a lack of care and concern. I think it might just be a difficult topic to address. But I do think that we have to move beyond just training, because I agree with everything Councilmember Lee said. And I would really like to see more generative conversation around that. not in an intent to harm or punish people, but an intent to actually shift what is expected as a result of the training, not just that the training was done, but what do we expect to change?
Thank you, Councilmember Farrell. Anybody else on the council wish to weigh in? Councilmember Rogers.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hall and other council members who voiced your opinions.
Mhm.
I'd just like to say that I agree with what you said, and the accountability piece. I liked Councilmember Lee's suggestion about possibly having people use the REAP tool that we've developed, because there was a lot of thought and equity trying to get people on board, and I think that would be a way to see if it really truly works the way that we intended. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else from the council? Councilmember DeFontorum, to be followed by Councilmember Meehan.
Thank you, Chair Hall, and thank you everyone that's commented. So I just want to share, tribes receive Indian Community Development Block Grant. It's a percentage set aside out of CDBG on the national appropriation. And what I will share with you is we're having conversations in other forums about challenges with the criteria and barriers in the application process, which isn't necessarily what we're talking about here. But I think that where there is an opportunity to examine the rules that are in place that can be changed at the state level, I'd really like to see some lean in to looking at the barriers for communities of color when you're looking at competitive funding. And I am happy to provide some suggestions based on real life experience there. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody else? Let's see, I believe.
Hi, Chair Hall. It's Councilmember Meehan.
Yes. That's
Hi,
right.
sorry I was late, folks. I didn't get to catch the whole presentation. I caught that last quarter of it. There seems like there was a lot of work put into it. And I just would like to echo the comments of my fellow council members about getting that real life experience. Councilmember DeFontorum just mentioned that having that real life experience and the barriers and the things that are really people are struggling with. I mean, in large amounts of numbers of people are struggling with different things. To have that be a part of the plan. Have those people have something to say about what's not working, and I feel like that a lot of these places, a lot of these spaces, we don't really turn to the people that you're actually serving and look at what they're struggling with. I mean, as a whole. So I appreciate everybody's comments, and again, sorry I was late.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. I was just, thank you, Councilmember Meehan for raising that. I was wondering if we could request a teach-in for the council about the whole bag that's called community action, and where to come from, and what's the legislation, and the tripart, like all of the basic pieces of understanding, because we're a majority new council now. And so in some of the same ways we've asked for, some discussion about housing finance agency and some of these other things, it feels like one of the threads that, could be helpful for us to mature as a council is to have sort of this learning track, right, that starts to cover some of the basic functions and projects of the organization, because otherwise we just touch actions like the strategic plan update. So we're touching it now, and we'll never talk, we won't talk about it again unless something else comes up. So if we could just start thinking about some teach-ins for us, maybe once a quarter or every other month, I think it'd be super helpful for all of us to be able to mature our understandings about the stuff we don't know about because we're new.
Councilmember Lee, just couldn't agree more. And certainly I'll follow up and to make sure that we're able to provide that. I think some of that context is really important too. I really appreciate it. And I know that Interim Director Weber, who I normally call Liz, you will chime in on some thoughts from the feedback that we received here. But I think that there are elements of the Community Action Agency and this funding, federal funding, that is specifically for that, and absolutely, this input is critical, and where we push and pull and all of those dynamics here, and the note on accountability is critically important. I also think it's important to put that also in context of the dramatic changes that we're doing with a lot of the programming and funding that is going out in the homeless services network, that is very, targeted, outcomes-based accountability that isn't instead of, or in conflict, or in contradiction, or any of that. But I think putting those pieces in context is important, and a piece of that is education. So thank you, and we'll follow up with that.
All right, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair Hall. After reviewing this information, and I echo a lot of what my fellow council members are saying, but I also would like us to be very mindful of coming from a small rural community. In order to implement all of these plans and doing DEI work, that has been a tremendous challenge, I know, for a lot of folks in the area. This is all due to the fact of capacity. I mean, we're talking about wanting to do strengthen capacity. However, in small rural communities, there's a big struggle with capacity itself. Many people wear many caps in this area. We're not just directors, we're not just case management. We're being pulled left and right to do multiple positions. Just in order to keep an agency running, any type of social service agency running. And so I would just like to understand how how we're already being spread too thin, how to implement another new process into this. I also know that as far as tracking any type of data, that is also a very significant challenge for many rural communities due to the fact of we are always having to provide data, and sometimes things just get left behind because we have more important other things to address. So I would also like the opportunity, because I do know that, some people go hand in hand with community and action agencies, but we would also like to be well informed and well trained up on what their processes are and how they are providing data and how they're doing DEI work, because I do know that in many rural communities, there's just not enough time in the day to practice and do training on DEI work itself. So I just want to be mindful and actually bring that to light, that we would need maybe some type of a rapid training rather than a long, extensive training. Such as what Councilmember Lee just said, 3 years, that is a very, very long time. I'm just wondering if there's any way we can possibly shorten this up, or just understand and work towards what the community needs are, and be able to make changes as needed, especially with smaller rural communities. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else?
I would just like to add an appreciation, if I can, for just a moment of the feedback here. I think it is really helpful for us. I really love the idea of coming back for a teach-in around the Community Action Agency network and those relationships. And I think we have some clear information gathering and update we can do in order to prepare there. I think we're hearing very clear messages around what is beyond DEI training, but I really appreciate the recognition that that has different impacts depending on where you are in the state. I also didn't want to lose the piece about the updated funding formula and the fact that the base amount has not changed for a very long time. And, you know, the piece about accountability, I think also we can bring in more information around how we are talking about that with the CAA network and CAPO, and as Deputy Director Yant said, how that also relates to our bigger picture overall approaches to homelessness and housing instability in this moment with some of the other funding sources. So just wanted to really appreciate that feedback, and we have some clear things that we can bring back to this group in our quarterly teach-ins. I love that phrase. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, then I guess we're going to bring this very useful conversation to an end. And I will note that we are at the end of our agenda. So if there is no other business to come before the council. Oh, yes. I think, Mary, something's amusing you.
I was just like, literally an hour? That is a
Yeah.
first. I will say that is a first.
This has got to be, at least in my 6 years, it's a first. So I will declare us adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. 30 minutes. Wow.